Hey everyone, today I'm going to be sharing with you 10 rules that I came up with that can not only help fix problems in your long-term relationship, but can also take it to the next level. They can increase the connection between you and your partner, and they can give you so much more enrichment out of what you have. Now, how did I come up with these? How did I develop 10 fairly simple rules that apply to most people's relationships? Well, in part, they came from hundreds of years of relationship experience, not just my own, but I also spoke with counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, a host of other types of relationship specialists. Then I also looked at friends' relationships, families' relationships, my parents' relationship. They've been married for 57 years. And I took all that information and I started to identify key points in different relationships that were creating commonalities. When I first started looking into this, it appeared that there could be millions of different things that could come up in a relationship, some good, some bad. But then after a while, I started to notice that what was really going on is there are a handful of general themes that repeat themselves across everyone's relationships, but these themes manifest themselves in a variety of different details. Just as an example, one of the commonalities I've noticed in relationships that are on the rocks is there exists an unmet need. And by that I mean one of the partners has a need that is not being met. Either they need something from the relationship that's not being met, or something in their external world is not being met, but basically they're going along and they're not getting their needs fulfilled. If the couple is able to identify that need and meet that need, that clears up a lot of problems. So what I've done is I've come up with 10 rules specifically designed to address these overarching, higher level common trends and alleviate them. Now, if there are no issues in a relationship, by practicing these rules and setting them forth, what you do is you actually enhance your relationship and you elevate it and you make it that much better for you. Just so you know, everything I talk about in this video, all the rules will be explained in further detail in separate videos that address only that rule. Because when it comes to relationship advice, there really is no such thing as too much granularity or diving too deep or too much discussion about a topic. For myself, I really get it only after information is presented multiple times in many different ways. Then the logjam in my head gets broken. So my approach is to present each piece of information many different times in many different ways, not repeating it, not saying the same thing over and over again, but shedding new light on it and taking a look at it from different angles until the right angle or the right message comes across to you and it clicks and you get value from this and your relationship is benefited. That's all I want. I just want you to have a great relationship. So let's get into these. And these are not listed in order of importance because in a relationship, the most important rule depends on what you're facing at hand, and they can change over time because relationships change over time, problems change over time. What you're facing now isn't going to be what you're facing in the future, and it also isn't what you've been facing in the past. So please take these all with equal weight and apply them as necessary. So for each of these rules, I'm going to state what the rule is, explain why it exists, and then describe how to implement that rule. And I believe it's important to discuss the why of these rules so understanding can be brought into the picture, which will help you think through what the right thing is to do in the situation. It will give you a base and a background of where this is coming from so you can apply it exactly as you need to when the time arises. Rule number 1. Whenever a problem or something comes up in a relationship that's causing you stress, don't create a partner versus partner dynamic where you guys are arguing against each other because this problem exists. Instead, go out of your way to create a partner and partner versus the problem situation. And by that I mean, it's us versus it. We together have got this problem. How do we deal with it? And the reason is, if you were to have that first situation where it's partner versus partner, obviously that's going to create emotion. That's going to create feelings of anger, feelings of resentment, hostility. And whenever emotion is involved in a decision tree, it's almost impossible to come to the right conclusion. Instead of using statements to tell your partner what to do, such as, we need to do this, or what we're going to do is we're going to make a budget and make sure we stick to it. Use questions as a way of softening your message and giving them a chance for input. What that will do is it'll help diffuse any tense feelings and reduce the impact of what you're trying to get across. So a lot of times when people are told things or they're dictated to, that will cause a little bit of resistance. So instead, use a question instead of a statement to help further the conversation. Just as an example, instead of saying something like, we need to come up with a budget and stick to it every month, use a question. Would it help with our spending problems if we were to come up with a budget and we tried to stick to that every month? That's a much softer way of still getting the same idea across. If it turns out to be a bigger problem than you first expected, or if emotions start to rise, or the conversation is just spiraling out of control, stop for a minute and use physical contact. By that I mean, go over to your couch, invite your partner to sit next to you, put your arm around them, snuggle up. Take a minute, tell them that you love them, reassure them, let them know that you have tremendous feelings for them, and you don't want this to be such a big deal. Just literally say, hey, I love you. I'm sorry this is so difficult. I need to work through this with you. Thank you for being patient. How can we move forward? Ask them a question, ask them for advice. What that will do is there's a tremendous relaxation and a tremendous amount of comfort that can be conveyed through loving physical contact. That will help to alleviate some of the stress that's going on. Rule number 2, present a united front to the world. You and your partner are a team. You're a couple. You're together. And the rest of the world sees you almost as one unit. So why do you do this? When you're a united front, you know your partner has your back, and that's an incredibly reassuring feeling. You develop faith and you develop confidence in your relationship. It gives you feelings of safety, feelings of security, and it helps you feel more comfortable when you're around that person. That's your best friend. They've got you, you got them, no questions. So how do you do this? How do you create that united front? First, talk through a lot of the big issues with your partner on your own time. Get on the same page. Try to get in step. Understand what they think about things. Tell them how you feel about things. Reach a decision as a couple before moving forward. Second, and this is the most common way that it comes up, say you're out with friends or you're just out in public, you're out around other people, and something in the conversation comes up, no matter what it is, you share your partner's opinion. You support them. You're on their side. You agree with what they agree with. Never throw your partner under the bus. Even if you fervently disagree with them, don't do so right there. Support anything positive or anything that you agree with as much as you can. And if you can't do that, just remain silent until you have a chance to talk about it with them after the fact. That will create a united front with you and your partner versus the world. And that's a great feeling. Rule number 3, and this one is huge. It's about communication. And I could spend an awful lot of time talking about communication. You see what I did there? But seriously, rule number 3 is listen to the meta-communication. And by that I mean, don't get caught up so much in the actual words of what your partner is telling you, but look for the message of what they're trying to tell you. Words are fairly imprecise. Very few people are good at expressing their emotions using words. And quite often, what you can gain from looking at the bigger picture is much more important than what they're actually saying to you. And what someone is telling you is different from what they're trying to communicate. But if you can look at the higher level language, the meta-communication, you can get it right and understand and address their concerns. Now, there's a 2-step procedure for implementing this. When your partner is communicating something to you and they're telling you something, look at the object of their communication, then try to determine their attitude toward that object. And that will give you a pretty good idea of what they're trying to tell you. So for example, and this happened to me just the other day. My partner and I were going to go to a friend's house for a barbecue. It was the first time we've been invited over. And we were told we can bring dogs because they have dogs. Well, 15 minutes before we went over there, my partner said to me, "Are you sure it's okay we can bring the dogs?" So the object of my partner's communication were the dogs. Her attitude was uncertainty of whether or not we could bring them. So what that let me know was she was worried about bringing the dogs. Why was she worried? I didn't know yet, but she was, because I knew we had permission. So stepping back to the previous rule, I didn't have enough information yet to know exactly what was going on. I asked her what the concern was. I told her, yes, we have permission. Are you concerned about bringing the dogs? It turned out she was, because it was a very hot day. She was worried that if our dogs didn't get along with their dogs, that we would have to put our dogs in our car and they couldn't stay in the car because it was too warm. And that message was conveyed in the initial question of, are you sure it's okay to bring the dogs? But just my own personal experience, I've noticed whenever my partner asks me a question, especially if she asks 2 or 3 questions about the same subject, that's a huge yellow flag. That means she's got something on her mind, and I need to find out more right away in order to work through this. You'll start to learn what these yellow flags are as well, but watch out for questions. When your partner starts asking you repeated questions, there should be a firework of awareness going off in your head of, ooh, I need to put down whatever's going on in my mind and pay attention to this right now. That's a big warning flag. All right, rule number 4. In a relationship, maintain a 30% overlap with your partner. Imagine a Venn diagram. You're one circle, your partner's the other circle. You each have 70% of your lives to yourself, and 30% of your circles overlap. And that 30% is your relationship. In other words, your relationship consists of only about 30% of what makes you two up as individuals. Why do you do this? Well, if you maintain 70% of yourself to yourself, what that does is it forces you to do the heavy lifting of learning how to make yourself happy. You are forced to learn the metaphysical lessons of self-sufficiency and happiness, and you're not going to rely on your partner for your own happiness. There's a strong tendency in relationships to depend on that other person to make us happy, and no one can ever do that. No one else can ever make you happy. If you expect your partner to do it, you're going to be disappointed, and they're going to let you down, and you're going to go from relationship to relationship continually being disappointed. But if you're able to make yourself happy, if you're able to do that heavy lifting and generate your own happiness, being with your partner is just gravy. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. And why do I say 30%? Where does that number come from? And again, I'll explain more in another video, but what I've noticed is more than 30%, if you say spend 50 to 70 or even 90% of your time together, that can easily turn into codependency. Whereas if you spend less than 30%, let's say you only spend 20% of your time or 10% of your time together, that can lead into two people drifting apart. Now, how do you implement this? As a quick and easy rule, simply spend 30% of your hours together. But in every relationship, that 30% looks different. For me, my partner is at work 10 to 16 hours a day. So on a daily basis, I'm with my partner 0 to 20% of my time. Whereas on the weekend, we're together about 70% of the time. So it averages out over, say, the course of a week to about 30%. So whatever your lives look like, whatever your working schedules are, your sleeping schedules, if you're in a long-distance relationship, whatever it is, just shoot for 30% over the long haul. And that will come pretty close to the mark. Okay, rule number 4, embrace change. Life is volatile. Things are always changing. If you have set plans and you stick to those plans come hell or high water, you're going to be disappointed. Life is going to throw you curveballs. If you're able to maintain flexibility and able to adapt to new situations, that's going to alleviate a lot of stress. So that's the why of this rule. Stress, by definition, is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. So what happens is that stress is generated when you expect a particular outcome or you want a particular outcome, and it doesn't have to be related to the relationship. It could be related to work. It could be personal advancement. It could be you simply wanted to go fishing that afternoon, whatever it is. Then if what you wanted to have happen, outcome A, doesn't happen, you're left with outcome B, and outcome B is seen as the adverse or demanding outcome, and that causes you stress. So how do you embrace change? Well, first of all, it's going to take practice, but every time you make an effort, you're going to get a little bit better at it, and you will see some improvements, and things are going to be a little bit easier every time you try to embrace whatever change you're facing. Now, as a side note, I do recommend you read or listen to, I personally prefer audiobooks, The Stoic Challenge by William B. Irwin, and that really does embrace the concept of embracing change. You handle it in a stoic manner. But what I found works really well is to practice disattachment. And if you disattach the expectation of outcome A, what happens is then whenever you're encountered with outcome B through Z or whatever, you no longer attach the adverse or demanding feelings to that secondary outcome. Outcome B is no longer stressful. You've taken outcome A, you're no longer going to get outcome A, and instead, outcome B becomes just as desirable. The demanding nature, the adverse nature of outcome B is eliminated. Therefore, by definition, you cannot be stressed by it. This sounds like a word game, but in practice, it does work. If you eliminate your attachment to a particular outcome, you're going to be much less stressed when plans change. As another side note, disattachment is a tenet of Buddhism. And if you'd like more information on this, of course, I'm going to have another video on it, but learn about the teachings of Buddhism. They will work very heavily on removing attachment from your life. That's where I picked this up and implement it in my life, and it works out really well. Rule number 6, always remember that the other person lives in their own world, and that world is different from yours. Now, this isn't men are from Earth, women are from Venus type of reference. What I mean is, what you see going on with that person, and when you're together, that's just the tip of the iceberg of their existence. They are at a different work environment. They have different responsibilities at home. You're at a different work environment. You have different groups of friends. It's very useful, particularly useful to remember this when your partner is acting differently and you can't understand why. Let's say suddenly your partner becomes angry or aloof or cold. It's very easy and very normal to take that as an attack on you or a vote of disapproval for whatever reason they don't like you. When in fact, most often, something's going on that you're not aware of in another part of their life that is bleeding through to your relationship. Now, how do you get to the bottom of this? How do you implement this? How do you keep in mind that how do you keep in mind that your partner lives in a different world? Well, ask questions. If you notice your partner is acting differently, ask them, "Hey, I noticed that you seem a little distant tonight. Are you okay? Is everything fine in your life?" And they may open up. They may tell you. They may not. If they don't tell you, start to gather evidence. Start to look for patterns. For example, my partner is always stressed Sunday afternoon, starting about noon to about 8 o'clock. And it took me a lot of time to figure out why this was. And what I realized is that Monday morning, she goes on call at 7 a.m. Monday and gets off call 7 a.m. Tuesday. She's on call for 24 hours. So she starts thinking about this and processing it every Sunday starting about noon. Because when she's on call, she can be called immediately to potentially be thrown into a life-saving situation where she has to make a decision that will literally save someone's life or someone's baby's life. And that's a lot of stress. So I realized over time that there was a pattern developing, and I had the evidence. She goes on call at Monday at 7 to see the pattern and understand it for what it was. Now, the best way to predict the future and for me to know what's going to happen next is to take a look at the past. I know next Sunday at noon, she's going to start to become a little bit not herself, and I know why, so I can adapt to that. And instead, I can focus my efforts on making her more comfortable, trying to have a more copacetic afternoon, doing more things around the house to try to reduce her stress. Rule number 7, and this was such a gem, such a gift from one of the counselors I've spoken to. And the rule is, use the phrase, "so you." Now, let me explain this a little bit further because I know that's not obvious. What that means is whenever your partner's communicating with you and they have a question or a concern or they're trying to work through something, you want to stay away from telling them what to do. People don't tend to learn or advance or grow as individuals if they're consistently being told how to solve their own problems. Imagine if you were expressing to your partner something that bothered you and they simply said, "Oh yeah, well, you just got to go tell that guy what you think." Well, that's conclusory. It's almost dismissive, and it doesn't really let you work through the process of what you're trying to resolve. So instead, when there's a problem or a concern that you and your partner are discussing, and they need help with something, all you do is you use the phrase "so you." You listen to what they say, then you rephrase what they said back to them. You don't repeat it. You take what they say and you say it in different words, prefaced by the phrase "so you." As an example, let's say my partner comes to me and says, "At work, my coworker just doesn't get anything done. I have to pick up all of his work and do it for him, and then he takes the credit." Okay. Now, obviously the problem is that the coworker's a slacker. My partner's stressed out about that. And the meta communication is she's trying to figure out what to do. Instead of saying, "Well, stop doing it for him," or "go talk to your manager," or coming up with an infinite number of solutions, all I do is I say, "So you feel like your coworker isn't really pulling their weight," or "so you feel like you're having to do a lot of your coworker's work." And by rephrasing it, they're going to grab that and they're going to expand upon it. "Yeah, I really do feel that way, and I just don't think it's fair." So you really feel almost like you're being taken advantage of. Is that right? In some ways I do. Yeah, I'm being taken advantage of. And I need to come up with a way of just reducing my workload because I can't keep doing what he's supposed to be doing. So you need to find a way You get the idea. You get the picture. And you can do this repeatedly over and over again. I've actually done it like 6 or 7 or 8 times in a row. And the phrase goes so unnoticed, yet so accepted and so welcomed that eventually the person you're speaking with begins to come to conclusions and say, yeah, I need to do this, or I need to resolve it by talking to my coworker and having him do his own work and really bringing it to a point. But by them making that conclusion on their own, they've gone through the critical thought process of figuring out their own problems. And that's going to give them the gift of learning how to solve more problems in the future. It's going to open up new pathways in the brain and new ways of understanding how to resolve problems. Never actually tell someone what to do when they come to you with a problem, unless, and there's a very specific exception, they ask you what you think or what to do. If they ask, they're seeking advice, and that's when you simply state what you believe to be the correct thing. And that's when you open up. Every other time, it's always better to open up with the "so you" phrase and let the conversation evolve on their terms. Rule number 8, and this is going to seem too commonsensical, but assume your partner likes you. Always assume they like you. They wouldn't be with you if they didn't. Now, why do you do this? If you fully believe and accept the fact that your partner likes you, that's going to boost your self-confidence. You're going to open up as a person. You're going to be willing to share more of your life with that partner because you know they like you like them, you want to become one, you want to become closer. But also, when there's a difficult conversation or your partner's in obvious distress, if you assume or you know they like you, that's going to give you more emotional capacity to be patient with them. Instead of it seeming like someone is coming at you and attacking you, you know someone that likes you and someone that you like in return, or someone that loves you, someone you love in return, is having a problem. That's going to give you a lot more capacity to help them work through it. Now, how do you do this? And it's simple. There's only really one way. You repeat it till you believe it. You tell yourself, my partner likes me, my partner loves me. And you repeat it. If it takes 100 times, you do it 100 times. If it takes 1,000 times, you do it 1,000 times. But I guarantee eventually it will sink in. You repeat it enough, it will sink in. And you will have that understanding that your partner loves you. And that's going to make growing in your relationship for you much more easy. Rule number 9, be considerate and thoughtful. Or as a sub-rule, and this is a different way of saying it, be considerate instead of romantic. Now, what I've noticed in myself and in a lot of other relationships is, especially in the beginning, people will tend to think that being romantic does all the hard work of the relationship. If they're romantic and if they do sweet things or give their partner gifts, then they don't have to do anything else. That's all the work. And that's not the case. Romanticism is wonderful. It has its time and place, and it definitely lets your partner know how you feel, but it is not a substitute for thoughtfulness or consideration. Furthermore, and this took me a long time to figure out, thoughtfulness and consideration are the daily forms of romanticism. If you're romantic, classically romantic to a partner every day, and you're bringing them flowers, or you're singing them a song, or you're baking them a cake, that's like trying to make a meal out of icing. It's great at first, and it tastes good, but eventually you're just going to get a stomachache, and both of you are going to be kind of sick of it. But instead, if you're thoughtful and considerate, that's what lasts the test of time. That's what's accepted by and appreciated by your partner every day, every time you do that. Now, how? How do you be thoughtful and considerate? It is something that's easily grasped after just a little bit of practice. The way you do it is you put yourself into the other person's shoes and imagine to the best of your ability what they're going through, what they're thinking, what they're experiencing. Then you ask yourself, what would I like right now? And whatever you come up with, you do it. And here's the wonderful thing. By doing what you think to be the right thing and trying to be considerate, even if you get it wrong, they're still going to be happy because they've seen you make that effort and they're going to appreciate the effort, even if the execution still needs a little bit of nudging in the right direction. They're going to be happy you thought about them. They really are going to like that. So just as examples, you borrow your partner's car to go to the grocery store or run an errand, well, fill it up on the way back. That way they don't have to. If you go to Starbucks, grab them their favorite drink, bring it back. Wait until they wake up in the morning before you make a lot of noise or you play loud music. When it's their day off and your day off and you get some time together, watch a movie that you know he or she will enjoy as well as you. Just little things. Try to think about the little things. This is where the details really matter. Be considerate and thoughtful. It goes so far. Rule number 10, and for me, this is one of the more important rules in my relationship with my partner, and it is simply be their best friend. Year after year, decade after decade, who do you want to see on a daily basis? Who do you want to wake up to next? Your best friend? Or someone who's a pretty good friend? I know what I'd pick. All of us want to spend as much time as possible with someone that we consider to be our best friends. That's what makes life good. That's what makes us happy. That's what makes us feel good. And here's something I've noticed. If you don't see your partner as your best friend, you're going to encounter some need for correction. There's going to be a few adjustments of the relationship down the way, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult than it needs to. So really, open up to that person. Let them in. Make sure they let you in too, and just be good friends. Be best friends. Now, how do you do this? Well, first, we're going to take a very similar approach as to the last rule. Put yourself in that person's shoes and ask yourself, what would they like? What would they like to see? How can you be a friend to them? What needs can you satisfy? Just basically start thinking of them as much as, if not more, than you think of yourself. Then furthermore, think about how you treat your other friends. What do you do for them that furthers your friendship? What do they like? How do you interact with other people in your lives that you see as friends? And simply repeat it with your partner. It's not that difficult to conceptualize. The challenge comes in executing it, to be friendly and to be the best friends with someone you see on a daily basis. This rule is just like the rest of them in that the more you practice at it, the easier it's going to get. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you have any questions about these rules or any other questions, please just let me know in the comments below. My only goal and my only purpose here is to help you have an absolutely fantastic long-term relationship. Again, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Remember, there will be other videos in the future that explain each of these rules in much more detail. And thank you so much. Have a great day. All right, rule number 4. In a relationship, maintain a 30% overlap with your partner. So what this means is imagine a Venn diagram. You're one circle, your partner's the other circle. You each have 70% of your lives to yourself, and 30% of your circles overlap. And that 30% is the amount of time that you spend together. And that 30% is your relationship. In other words, your relationship consists of only about 30% of what makes you two up as individuals. Why do you do this? Why do you do this? Well, if you maintain 70% of yourself to yourself, that forces you to do the heavy metaphysical lifting. Well, if you maintain 70% of yourself to yourself, what that does is it forces you to do the heavy lifting of learning how to make yourself happy. You are forced to learn the metaphysical lessons of self-sufficiency and happiness, and you're not going to rely on your partner for your own happiness. There's a strong tendency in relationships to depend on that other person to make us happy, and no one can ever do that. No one else can ever make you happy. If you expect your partner to do it, you're going to be disappointed, and they're going to let you down, and you're going to go from relationship to relationship continually being disappointed. But if you're able to make yourself happy, if you're able to do that heavy lifting and generate your own happiness, being with your partner is just gravy. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. And why do I say 30%? Where does that number come from? And again, I'll explain more in another video, but what I've noticed is more than 30%, if you say spend 50 to 70 or even 90% of your time together, that can easily turn into codependency, and that's not good. That can easily turn into codependency. Whereas if you spend less than 30%, let's say you only spend 20% of your time or 10% of your time together, that can lead into two people drifting apart. So the ideal thing is to have 30% of your lives together. Now, how do you implement this? As a quick and easy rule, you spend 30% of the hours together. Now, how do you implement this? As a quick and easy rule, simply spend 30% of your hours together. Ideally, what you would like to do is spend 30% of your lives together, where it's more about common interests and as well as time and shared goals. 30% of that would be shared together. But in every relationship, 30% can look different. But in every relationship, that 30% looks different. For me, my partner is at work 10 to 16 hours a day. So on a daily basis, I'm with my partner 0 to 20% of my time. Whereas on the weekend, we're together about 70% of the time. So it averages out over, say, the course of a week to about 30%. Whatever works for you over a long term, just try to be with your partner. Just try to meet so whatever the dynamics are of your relationship or however it's set up, just try to, over a long period of time, be together about 30% of the time. Whatever your and your partner's life looks like, try to spend just about 30% of your lives together over the long term. And you should find, and that will be pretty close to the mark. So whatever your lives look like, whatever your working schedules are, your sleeping schedules, if you're in a long distance relationship, whatever it is, just shoot for 30% over the long haul. And that will come pretty close to the mark. Okay, rule number 4, embrace change. Life is volatile. Things are always changing. If you have set plans and you stick to those plans come hell or high water, you're going to be disappointed. Life is going to throw you curveballs. If you're able to maintain flexibility and able to adapt to new situations, that's going to alleviate a lot of stress. And that's the why of how you do this. And that's the why for this rule, is to reduce stress. Stress, by definition, and I've got it right here, is where the fuck is it? And that's the why for this rule, alleviate stress. Stress, by definition, is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. So what happens if you're not able to adapt to change? You want outcome A, but life throws you an uncontrollable situation or uncontrollable change of plans, and instead you get outcome B. And if you're not able to adapt to that change, outcome B can be seen So that is the why for this rule, to reduce stress. Stress, by definition, is the state or mental condition. So that's the why of this rule, is to reduce stress. Stress, by definition, is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. And how that manifests itself in this rule is, let's say you plan and you expect outcome A to happen.